Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Second Lieutenant Madeline Ryu, and I will be presenting our research on gender-based differences in moral injury and distress in combat surgeons. I have no disclosures. To start, moral injury is defined as when one violates one's conscience or moral compass when witnessing or failing to prevent an act that goes against their moral values and principles. Moral distress stems from the feeling of powerlessness to do what one believes is right. Collectively, moral injury and distress, or MID, has significant impacts on the long-term performance and health outcomes of those that it affects. So moral distress is of great interest in the civilian healthcare realm and has often been misdiagnosed as burnout and is linked to more people leaving their jobs because of it. Moral injury is of great interest in military combatants and has often been mischaracterized as PTSD. It is also linked to greater rates of suicide and greater difficulty transitioning to civilian life after retirement. Recently, there has been greater interest in the gender differences in moral injury and distress in the civilian healthcare realm and in military combatants separately. However, there has been little to no research done in the intersection of these three previously mentioned domains of healthcare workers, military service members, and gender. Therefore, our project aims to assess MID in combat surgeons deployed to Role 2, or far forward, environments in Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom during peak casualty periods, and characterize differences in MID that is associated with gender. We employed a convergent mixed method study that came in two parts. The first component was a pre-interview survey which collected basic demographic information and had participants fill out the MMD-HP, which assigned a score to the experiences of MID of each participant. The second component was a semi-structured interview conducted to reach thematic saturation and dig into the individual experiences of MID. High volume periods were defined as 2003 to 2008 for OIF and 2009 to 2012 for OEF. Here are some of the results of the demographic information that we collected. Of interest is that 75% of our participants were in their early stages of their military careers at a rank of 04. 80% came from the Army. The deployment of interest for 50% of our participants was their first ever deployment. And in a full forward surgical team, there's usually 4 or 5 surgeons per team. However, for 45 of our participants, they were in teams much smaller than this. Also of interest is that our ratio of female to male participants reflected the ratio of female to male officers during this time. Here are some of the highest and lowest ranked statements in the MMD-HP by gender. For men, the highest source of MID came from the inability to treat patients because of the far forward settings of the deployment. However, for women, much of the MID came from the pressure from above or from command teams or from pressure from male counterparts. However, for men, this was actually among the lowest ranked source of MID, with pressure from power hierarchies ranking among the lowest. And for women, the lowest sources came from the actual patient care itself. In the interviews, we identified 6 total themes. For 3 of these themes, there were no differences in gender in the quality of answers, and these had to do with family, sleep, and reintegration. However, for 3 of the themes, there were significant differences between the gender, with the first regarding the safety of self and team. Although there were similar rates of acknowledgement between men and women, both 75% of this problem, the difference lied in the fact that men were more concerned about indirect fires and threats from captured enemy detainees, whereas women were more concerned about direct attacks by enemy combatants. Second was the disagreements with command. Both men and women identified problems in this area and had similar frustrations in the fact that the command teams were non-medical personnel that did not understand and did not have the competency to take their concerns seriously when it came to treatment, supply needs, etc. However, the difference lied in that all of the women identified problems with bullying and demeaning comments from commanders and from their male teammates, with comments such as, oh, it's emasculating when you took command because you're a female, and things like that. And so, and then another aspect that was different in that women were more concerned about speaking up out of fear of negative OERs and career impacts. However, for men, this was a less prominent concern. And lastly, when asked about their primary concern during the deployment, men identified their primary concern to be limited resources available for care in these far-forward environments. However, female participants identified that the primary concern was difficulties with separation and communication with family. Female participants experienced more guilt and pressure in being away from their families during the deployment, and more readily identified communication difficulties while being away with people back home. In summary, there was no correlation of MID to any other demographic factor, including number of previous deployments, age, rank, etc. Women overall scored higher for MID in the MMDHP and differed from men in these realms identified on the slide. Some of the limitations of our study is the potential for recall bias, possible participation bias, and the limited sample size. In conclusion, MID is highly prevalent in military surgeons during deployments, and there are very different sources of MID between the genders. Further research is necessary to better measure and characterize military MID and come up with strategies to counter or prevent MID. And it is important to develop different approaches to address the unique MID concerns of the military and gender. As women continue to grow in number as military surgeons and military service members, it is important to unearth the barriers to success that they face that impact their personal health and the care that they can provide. I would like to thank everyone that contributed to this study. This concludes my presentation. Are there any questions?